Hey guys, it's Z. Coming at you today with a different type of video than what we normally do. I normally try to avoid a lot of the finance and things like that just because I know that that's not always the most pleasant part of our community here. However, I did want to let you know a couple of Commander staples that I feel are worth having in your collection, even if it's just to add on to a long list of other cards you may have. For perspective, I don't own all of these cards, so take that as you will. I know at various points I have owned all of these cards, but as prices have fluctuated, cards have become more expensive, less expensive. People have offered me trades. I may not necessarily keep these in my collection like I should be. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover about 20 core cards for about every color that's going to help you out with various different archetypes or deck building things. In order to play around with, and we'll kind of see what you think about that, see, after these initial run, how y'all feel about them, and go from there. The big focus is primarily to put a spotlight on these cards that are pretty solid contributors or considerations depending on your deck's archetype. So that being said, we're going to start with white here today, and we're going to kind of work our way from most to least expensive, or I'm sorry, from least to most. So we're going to start at low, go high. All of these cards at the time of recording are under $10, and that's kind of the big threshold because a lot of people have this impression that Commander is a very, very, very forbidding format due to the price, when realistically it's not that hard to get into. Some of these cards are less than 25 cents. Some of them are going to be about $10, but these are just a couple of cards where if you're looking, hey, I want to have some general all-comer decent cards to kind of help buy a precon or buy 2 or 3 precons here or there and have some cards to build within. These are some decent starting points without breaking the bank. So, working our way through white, our first card is going to be Return to Dust. It's a solid removal spell. It does 2 important things, though. It can get you 2 cards for the price of 1, which, that's always fun. Interesting note, it's unforgeable, in case you like that. But, on the other side of things, it can also exile. And with Graveyard Recursion being such a predominant thing in the format, that ability to exile is pretty good. Our next card is going to be Crush Contraband. Same general idea. We're going to exile artifact or enchantment. You can only get 1, but it's a trade-off. You don't have that double white mana, and you can use it whenever you need it to get the 2, versus having to wait for your main phase. The next card we're running into is going to be Flicker Wisp. It's a flicker effect. So when it enters the battlefield, you can exile a creature and put it back into play, or another target permanent, notably. So it's permanent. So this one can affect lands, it can affect enchantments, artifacts, things of that nature. And then it returns at the beginning of the controller's at the beginning of the next end step. So with that, it's going to protect your things for a turn if you need it to. It's going to be able to blink in and out and get into the battlefield triggers. So it's a pretty versatile card. It's got a lot of decent purposes, and it's pretty affordable. So our next card on the list here is going to be God's Willing. It's a decent protection spell, and it gives Scry. So notably, it's really good for things like Commander-centric decks. Hey, I need to protect my Commander. I'm in white, so card advantage is a little bit harder to come by. Let me see if I can scry that top card of the deck. Is it something I need, or do I need to bottom deck it so I can try to get into the cards I want? So, it's got some use. I like it. I think it's pretty good in Commander-centric decks to protect your Commander or to get your Commander through to deal some damage. Next card we got is going to be Search the Premises. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, instigate. Investigate, not instigate. Investigate basically is going to let you pay 2 mana, draw a card by sacking that clue token that it gives you. So, in this case, it's a form of white card draw, and if you've heard from Commander circles, white is infamous for its hard ability to draw and its hard ability to ramp. In these ways, this is a card that kind of helps make it a little bit better, makes it a little bit more in paradigm, and it's not a breaking the bank like other cards we might recommend for those type of categories for white. So, looking at you, Smothering Tithe. The next card we have is SRAM, Senior Edificer. So, much like God's Willing was very good for those commander-centric cards, or decks, SRAM is a legendary creature 2/2 Dwarf Art Advisor, or Advisor. We talk today, it helps. Whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. Notice it says cast, so it does not have to resolve. Somebody can counter your spell, but you'll still get the card draw. This is a very good card in commander-centric strategies, such as Voltron strategies, where you want to put an aura on a card, or an equipment on a creature, and get in there. Or for those fun, flavorful vehicle decks, where you're just wanting to get your guys in boats and swing in. So, it's just another kind of decent value engine or draw spell for white, where white is the color that seems to be lacking those effects. So that's kind of why I wanted to showcase them, especially when they're affordable. So the next one we have is going to be Arden, Intrepid Archaeologist. This one, if you've played around Commander Legends, you're probably quite familiar with. But for those of you who aren't, again, this comes back to the commander-centric archetypes. This is a partner commander, though, so notably it can be the second commander in a partner deck. But what it's going to do is, the beginning of your combat, you can equip auras and equipment from wherever they are to one creature on your side of the field. So it's a free equip. So if you're trying to set up somebody who's unblockable and then attach a bunch of equipment so you can go in and alpha strike them, this card is going to let you do that. It's basically going to help you further the strategy, but at the same time, with it being a partner, it also allows you the capability to go, hey, I'm going to run another card as my big face card for the deck, and this is going to be the supporting piece to help me get there. So it's just something to keep in mind. Moving along to our next card, we have General Removal. We're looking at Oblation. Oblation is an instant 3 mana. The owner of target non-land permanent shuffles it into his or her library, and then draws 2 cards. So you can hit your own token, shuffle a token in, it'll cease to exist, and draw 2 cards. You can hit an opponent's very scary permanent that you don't have a way to deal with and nobody else can, and give them 2 cards, which, if the threat is that scary, giving them 2 cards is not really the biggest thing in the world. Somebody else can deal with those cards, especially if there's a blue player that opens their counterspell up. So that's kind of the use of the Oblation there. And again, all these cards are under $10, so it's just something to keep in mind. You know, if you've got a little bit of money to spend and you wanted to pick up some staples, this would be a list I'd recommend. The next one we've got is going to be Martial Coup. Sorcery X white white. Create X 1/1 soldier tokens that are white. If 5 is X or more, you destroy all other creatures. So, for 7 mana, you create 5 soldiers and destroy all the other creatures on the board. However, below that, it's just make a bunch of guys. More than that, you make a bunch of guys and still blow up everything that's not the human soldiers that are these white soldier tokens that were made off this. So, it's a board wipe that scales based on the lateness of the game, and in a token deck, it gives you value so you don't just get blown out by board wipe. In this case, it allows you to be able to board wipe favorably. Moving on to our next card, kind of going back to our central theme of, hey, white needs certain things. We've got Mentor the Meek. It's a human soldier, 2/2 for 3. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 mana. If you do, draw a card. So, again, we're kind of just looking at these baseline core levels of drawing extra cards. Kind of like an homage back to our Flicker Wisp previously, our next card is going to be Restoration Angel. So, it's 4 mana, 3/4. However, you can flash it in order to get that Flicker effect. And the Flicker effect is target non-angel creature. So, it's a little bit more specific, but it comes back immediately. Not only does it come back immediately, it can be flashed into play, and it's got a little bit beefier stats than the Flicker Wisp. So these are just some of the trade-offs you have to consider. And if in a Flicker deck or a Blink deck, why not both? So ultimately, that's just something to keep in mind there. The next card we're looking at is Unbreakable Formation. Unbreakable Formation is going to be 3 mana. Creatures you control get indestructible until end of turn. If you cast it during your main phase, you get to put a 1/1 counter on each of your creatures, and they gain vigilance until the end of turn. Basically, this is a defensive spell that you're going to use, but it does have some positive upside if you decide to play it in an offensive capability. So it's a little bit more versatile than just a general, hey, all my things have indestructible. So just something to keep in mind there. Next, I kind of went with another archetype specific card, because if you'll notice, white is pretty big on its archetypes. Some of the other colors are too, and we'll be covering certain archetype staple cards across the series, but for the most part, I didn't want to focus in on cards that were just very general or very just utilitarian. In this case, I've got Mesa Enchantress. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you may draw a card. It's nothing fancy on the stat block, nothing fancy in what it does. It just draws you a card for playing an enchantment. So, if your Enchantress deck is running green and white, that gives you upwards of 3 or 4 of these effects, and you allow yourself to keep rolling. The next card we're including here is going to be Ghostly Prison. Creatures can't attack you, or unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking you. It's a way of protecting yourself from an opponent's strike. It's a way of making yourself less of a target at the table in a lot of instances, because people don't want to spend that mana to attack you. They would like to further their own board state. Why attack you when I can just play 3 more creatures? It doesn't make a lot of sense, so in this case, a lot of the time this will save you a lot of damage over the course of a game. So after that, we have our one of the premium removal spells in white outside of Oblation, and that's going to be Generous Gift. 3 mana, destroy target permanent, its controller gets a 3/3 elephant. Nothing fancy, it's instant speed, but basically what this is going to allow you to do is, this is going to just allow you to slam in and go, hey, I don't really like that threat, I don't have a good other removal spell, but I've got the tool for every job here in the form of Generous Gift. Whether that's a land, whether that's a creature, instant, sorcery, or, well, permanent, so non-instant, non-sorcery, but everything outside of that. So a planeswalker that's getting a little bit troublesome with its, upticking and nearing its emblem, you can get rid of it before it ever becomes that problem. The next card we have is going to be Swords to Plowshares. Simple, smooth, fundamental removal spell. Exile target creature, gain life equal to, its controller will gain life equal to its power. So, if you've got a nasty thing coming in trying to just get you out, no, I don't want to deal with that. Make it go away. So that's basically what it's there for. It's just to protect yourself in the form of a removal spell. And if you notice, a lot of these are very core fundamental principles. It's removal, it's draw, it's ramp. Realistically, these are the things the format kind of revolves around. Outside of big game-ending splashy combos where the pieces tend to be more expensive. So these are the cheap fundamental pieces I believe people should be picking up. So the next one I've got is going to be Wrath of God. So if you've heard me refer to Wrath effects or board wipes, this is kind of the big granddaddy of them all. Destroy all creatures, they can't be regenerated. 4 mana. Get rid of them, I don't want to see them, I need them to go away. Well, it's a basic effect, but it's a needed effect. Sometimes you gotta change the parity at the table and bring everyone back down to 0. The next card we have here is a very similar card, Swords to Plowshares, and Path to Exile. So, interesting thing is, in certain decks, this can actually be a ramp spell, where you'll path your own creature, go find a land from your deck, put it into play. So it does have that niche use, but for the most part, you're going to be using it to deal with an opponent's threat, such as a major creature on their board, something like maybe an Avenger of Zendikar, or something like where if you let this card get out of control, it's going to be a threat, so you need to remove it. So the next card we're going to be looking at here, and really our second to last card. So we've gone through 18 of these cards already. Next one we have is going to be Blind Obedience. So it's got Extort. Whenever an opponent's... whenever artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Wanted to make sure I phrased that the correct way, so that way we made sure it was right. So, in this case, with these type of effects, it's going to slow the table down, it's going to grind combat, make it a lot slower of an affair, but with the Extort, it allows you a lot of extra late game value. Pay an extra white mana into it, drain every opponent for 1 point, and you're going to gain a point. Or, I'm sorry, you're going to gain that much. So, if you have 3 opponents, you'll gain 3 life. And effectively, it's a way to kind of just slowly take your opponents out of the game, especially if it's like, I play the spell, I play my Blind Obedience, I'll pay 3 because I don't have anything else going on. And it's going to net you 3 life, it's going to drain 3 life from your opponents. So, it's just something to keep in mind throughout the game, especially if you have other effects that grant Extort, where that drain becomes a lot more taxing and a lot more, viable to win a game off of. The last card we're going to have is very new. It's going to be from Innistrad Crimson Vow, so standard price may be driving you a little bit. I could be wrong there, but I'll be the first to admit standard's not my forte. But it's going to be Welcoming Vampire. Basically, it is a 3-mana 2/3 with flying. Whenever one or more other creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, you draw a card. This effect triggers once per turn. So, while it's not repeatable like Mentor the Meek, it is something where you don't have to pay the mana into it. So, it's a trade-off. Do you prefer the ability to burst draw off of a Mentor the Meek and draw 5 cards, paying 5 mana to do so? Well, that's still an option for you, but why not both? And again, all these cards are under $20. A lot of the core things I try to fundamentally revolve around were ramp, draw, removal. If you notice, we didn't go real hard on White's ramp, and the reason for that is because they actually had a lot of artifact synergy. So, in my mind, a lot of the biggest way to play them is going to be with artifact ramp, especially considering the white mana ramp spells tend to be more on the pricey end. We're looking at things like land tax, tithe, which I believe is reserve list. So there's a lot of things that go into it that make these more expensive or less viable than the artifact ramp here. When artifact ramp is becoming really easy to access, really affordable, and most of it's coming in at 2 mana or less. So, at least of a lot of new releases like Liquid Metal Torque. So, it's one of those, they're out there, it's just worth looking into it. But for now, that's been our white selection of cards I recommend picking up for the format, under $10. At the time of recording, the highest card here was $8.99. So, and most of the cards were under $5. So realistically, it's not going to be that hard to do, but I did want to showcase a couple of things that I think might be important to pick up in your collection now rather than when the price goes up. Because lately with Wizards reprints, it's been a hit or miss thing. Some cards may get reprint after reprint, and some may miss the reprint for 12 years. So, anyway, you let me know in the comment section below, what other white cards do you think that we should be adding to our commander boxes, preferably under $10. That way we can help each other out, and ultimately, all try to grow our boxes and make it a little bit more fun for everybody to play at the table. Anyway, this has been Z, and y'all have a good one.